Well, hello, everybody. What is today, Friday?
Yeah, it is Friday.
Happy Friday.
Yeah.
Guys, it's Pride Month. I guess the right thing to say is Happy Pride Month. That's weird coming from our perspective. But something that's been on our hearts lately has been the topic of suicide. Like, what pushes somebody to the point of giving up or wanting to give up or losing hope? Well, today we're going to talk about it, and if you are experiencing, well, wanting to off yourself, wanting to kill you, whatever, or if you know somebody that has, please come talk with us.
Yes. Well, hello everybody, and welcome to thoutraid, a show where we take on thoughts and find better ways of thinking about them. I'm Brandon, and this is Tim, and today we're going to be talking about suicide, and specifically about just the lies that are attached to it, and also I want to look into a little bit about the truths of the things that we're facing too, because every lie has its power because part of it is rooted in truth. Mm-hmm. If it wasn't, then it would be a lot easier to refute the lie. So I think we need to kind of go into both to get this well-rounded.
Well, before that, I kind of want to talk about it from our perspective.
Sure.
Because you and I are gamers.
Yes.
And I experience this a lot more than you do, but in gaming culture, I guess, maybe in bigger circles too, I don't know. But it's really easy for people to talk about suicide as just like this flippant, I'm going to kill myself, or you should kill yourself, or whatever. Man, like I play League of Legends, and oftentimes, especially when people are having a bad game, they talk about, hey, like you have different lanes, top laner, mid laner, bottom laner, as pertinent to the game. Top laner, you should kill yourself. Quit playing this game. Uninstall. Kill yourself. And it's like people throw that around so flippantly.
They really do.
And it's like there's no regard for the actual severity behind it, because I don't think people that throw it around so flippantly actually think that person's going to consider it. But you never know, man. Like, there's so much tough stuff in the world. There's so much like hurt and lack of hope and lack of community. I was just Brandon and I were talking prior to going live. His personal YouTube channel, he's got a video that seems to be trending on its own. We don't really do anything to promote it.
Not at all.
And what's its title?
If you are about to kill yourself, watch this. Mm-hmm. I think it's something around those lines. I could probably pull it up and tell you exactly what it was.
Well, yeah. The thing is, you got like 6,000 views on it, and initially it didn't have as many, and it's been I mean, that's not super viral or anything. We know that, but still, that's like 6,000 sets of eyeballs that have been on this message. I'm like, what would cause somebody to find that? Unless it's already in the algorithm, they had to go to, I want to kill myself, and it pops up.
That's what it was. Before you kill yourself, watch this. That's what it's called.
Yeah. And it's like, what is that person thinking? Do they go to YouTube looking for ways to kill themselves? I
don't know. That's very likely that they do.
Like, how to before you kill yourself.
That's very likely that they do that.
But the topic of today's stream is the deception of suicide. In our society, it's really easy to just get to a point where you think, okay, I'm done. With relationships, with jobs, with just things that are tough. Like, if you look at older generations, they make fun of younger generations for saying, well, back in my day, we insert commentary about how things were much more difficult. And like today, people are wimps, and everybody's so like easily agitated, which they are. People are so easily agitated these days.
I could be easily agitated these days.
Yeah. But it's like, it's the easy way out. If you're having that's why divorce is such a thing right now. It's like, yeah, you've given a commitment, and you've provided yourself with a covenant to this person. By the way, the difference between a contract and a contract is basically saying, I'll do this if you do this. Whereas a covenant is, I'm going to do this regardless of what you do. And that's what marriage is. But that's why the divorce rate's so high. It's an easy way out. Things are getting tough, so I just want to end it. Or at your job, you know what? I don't want to reconcile with my boss. I don't want to reconcile with my employees. I quit. And that, I guess that kind of plays into the whole concept of self-care in a really diluted way.
Mm-hmm. Because you can't go overboard. Like there are definitely toxic things that we get into, toxic work environments, toxic relationships, toxic habits that do need to be stopped. But not everything is toxic, and some things, and that can be tricky to kind of navigate what is specifically toxic and what is something that you need to continue to push through in. Like, you can't just blanket statement say that, like, if you quit your job or you leave that relationship or whatever, then you are lazy or whatever, you gave up too easily, because, like, we don't know, unless we are specifically in that person's shoes, whether or not what they're in is truly toxic or not. We can only best take it up for their word and then kind of go and get it from other perspectives. I mean, we can make better calls on it the closer we are, or if God just says, here's the answer to the problem. But if you don't have those two things, like, it's not just set and cut and dry.
Well, Brandon, and I guess this is for you guys too. I'm really curious. Have you ever thought about killing yourself?
Yes.
Yeah?
I have.
I have too.
Yeah.
Yeah. What was your situation?
I mean, honestly, it's been much more frequent this year than any other year of my life.
Really?
Mm-hmm.
You haven't told me this.
Yeah, I know.
And you're my second wife. It's a joke. It's a joke. There's an inside joke.
I mean, I haven't told you because it's not like it's been anything that I can't do something about. Like, it's not been anything serious. It's just been more of a thought that I've, like, kicked around, because just like with all the things that are not happening the way I expected to, there's just moments where it just feels like it would be easier if I didn't have to deal with it at all. And not even just that, but like, with the state that our country is in and the potentiality that I may need, like, in this world there will be trials and tribulations. Like, like, I don't know what it's going to be up. Like, I had a dream this morning that there was a person that I knew who was literally wanting to set me on fire and, like, burn me at the stake because I made mistakes. And I had spent the whole dream trying to find a way to get them to stop, while at the same time not run away from it, because, who wants to be burned alive? And finally, the dream concluded with, I realized that if you were to burn me, you would have to burn yourself, because all have sinned and fallen short of the glory of God. And so that they realized, okay, well, it's never going to stop if we start, kind of thing. Mm-hmm. And there's just a weird dream that I had of just, like, potential persecution. And it woke me up thinking, like, am I prepared for these things to happen? I still am not. Like, I don't want that to happen, but it could happen. I don't know. And so because of that, and because of things are just not where I thought they should be, sometimes it feels like, what, if I died, I wouldn't have to deal with any of this anymore. Yeah. It would be suddenly someone else's problem, not my problem. But it's nothing serious that I'm like, we need to get counseling now, because I can very easily move on from those thoughts. If I got to a place where it wasn't easy to refute it, then I would push myself to reach out. But that's the thing about people who are truly serious about suicidal. They're not going to talk about it. Mm-hmm. They're going to try to go through with it without you knowing.
I don't know, man. I see people, well, maybe.
I'm talking about truly serious. There are some people that kick it around, and if they bring it up, they're not truly serious. They're trying to find ways to either talk themselves down, or in worst case scenarios, they're trying to be manipulative.
Well, the question that you're supposed to ask somebody if they're suicidal is,
do you have a plan?
Do you have a plan?
Yeah.
Like, have you actually thought this out? And it's weird because, like, I'm not suicidal, but I know that throughout my life there have been times where I just thought it'd be so much easier just to give up, to end this, and I thought about how I could do it, But I don't know if I actually went through the steps of saying, okay, I'm going to do this, and just like, it's kind of like you plan a vacation. It's just, I guess, ideas of how it would happen in a very morbid way, because, I don't know, I just like to think about things, But why would suicide seem like the answer? Like, what would cause somebody to think, I need to end this? Because I want to tease something out. We all have needs, right? We all have needs. You wake up and I need to go to the bathroom. I need to eat food, you know. But there are other needs that aren't as easily defined, like the need for a relationship or the need for connection. I'll say that specifically. The need for connection, not relationship. The need to be known. That is a need. The need of purpose, the need of hope. Like, these are all needs that we need to have filled. Kind of like putting gas in your tank. When they're not filled, it's like, well, you know, I can't survive. Because if you don't eat, you're going to die. If you don't pee, your bladder is going to explode. If you don't have a relationship with people and connectedness, you're not going to feel known. And if you don't feel known, you don't understand what your purpose is. Because if you don't have a purpose, you don't know who you are. You don't know your true identity, right? And just walking back in the process of stepping backwards. But I don't know, like, what do you think? Like, why do you think suicide would seem like the answer to certain people?
Well, I mean, I think in reality, like, you know, it depends on the person. Some people feel like everything is their fault. So if everything is your fault, the solution is to get rid of yourself. And so that would be one reason why. In my situation, the reason why I would consider suicide is because I recognize it's one of those things of, you can't hurt me if I hurt myself first, kind of thing of, like, you know, like, I don't know what kind of persecution I could encounter in this world. I've heard about things that have been done in communistic societies. I've heard about things that have been done in the past in general through just reading the Word of God. And I see certain trends going on in this country with things moving towards socialism and communism more, which usually comes at the persecution of the church. And so my thought process is, if I kill myself, then at least I can control how I'm going to die, rather than having to go through torture, potentially. I don't know. And other things. You know, it's like swift death is better than slow death. Even though they both end the same place. And then also just, like, you know, like, another reason is just suddenly it's not my problem anymore. Like, you know, I don't have to deal with figuring this out. I don't have to deal with the anxieties anymore. I don't have to deal with the not knowing what's going to happen next or whatever, because it's no longer relevant. I'm now slipping into eternity. And that's some of the thinking that I've had. But there are other reasons why I think people would justify suicide. There could be chemical imbalances that lead towards that. There's not necessarily any particular thought process, but just the way that things are going wrong on the inside, it makes them more inclined towards that. I think it just depends on what you believe about yourself, what you believe about your circumstance. Do you have hope? Because if there is no hope, hope deferred makes the heart sick.
Yeah.
And so it just depends on the circumstance.
Something you said really piqued my interest, because I'm sitting here writing out reasons why someone would think suicide is the answer. And you said, the first thing you said was, it's my fault, right? And really where that comes from is shame. Because the difference between shame and guilt is acknowledging that you've done something wrong and realizing, okay, I need to fix this. But shame is acknowledging that you've done something wrong and thinking, I can't fix this. There's nothing I can do. So it's like hopelessness, helplessness. Then you also said, you can't hurt me if I hurt myself first. And I thought that was really interesting. I was just thinking about it. And then you said a keyword, control. And I know that for me, and I mean, I've never been suicidal, but I mean, like everybody, I've thought about suicide in some form or fashion. When it crossed my mind the most and I was tempted to go down that path, it's when, you know, my life was at the lowest of lows. I was like 25. And if any of you know my story in any way, there were a lot of poor decisions I made, and everything was coming to a head. Bank accounts were closed. My girlfriend broke up with me, and that sucked. So I felt unwanted. My car got repossessed, so I felt like I was in a hole. You know, I lived in a not great living situation, and it's just like everything that happened made me feel like I was in a deeper and deeper and deeper hole. And with my upbringing, my parents brought me up well, you know, like they taught me a lot of good principles and modeled a lot of good stuff for me, but they also modeled a lot of difficult things, like don't try and do things for yourself if you're not good enough. Right. Now that's not the mode of everything. My mom and my dad always told me that I can do everything that you put your mind to, like when I was younger, right? But when I got old enough to actually make these decisions, and there were immediate consequences to those decisions, like messing up my car if I didn't do my oil change properly. It's like, no, let somebody qualified do that. There wasn't the opportunity to try, fail, and adjust. And so it's one of those things where it's like, okay, well, if I can't control if my life is in shambles and it's falling apart, I'm going to control what I can. I can control how I go.
Yeah.
You know?
And I thought of another one, and I just want to put this one out there just so that you know, if someone comes to watch this later, or is watching it currently, that you're known. I think another time that I feel kind of tempted is, would anyone even care if I were gone? Like, you know, like sometimes my mind imagines, like, you know, how people would treat me if suddenly I was on my deathbed, you know, kind of thing. Like, who would be at my side? Who would suddenly show up, or something of that nature, like, which I think is kind of a manipulative thought in a way, but it's still there, like, you know, like, and I don't think everyone is intentionally manipulative, like my thought process can be when I think of that, but sometimes it's just that, like, wondering, do they even care about me? Would they show up if I was dying? Would they show up if I was dead? Who would actually be grieved by the loss of my life?
Yeah, and that goes back to when we were talking about needs a second ago, the need for connectedness, right? And when that need's not there, you start despairing it and realizing, man, I've tried, like I've talked to people in the past, and my heart goes out to them, because it's like, there are groups of people out there for everybody.
Yeah.
Everybody. So if you're feeling lonely, man, and you feel like you've tried and you've tried and you've tried, like going through school, man, that was tough, because I kept trying to insert myself in different social groups that I wanted to be in, and it never worked. And then at some point, the friends that wanted to be my friend for who I was were like, oh, so Tim wants this and not me. And, you know, they had their own friend group, and I felt ostracized from that because of that was my own fault. And I just felt lonely for the longest time, you know, and it wasn't until I found our group of friends, and I was like 28 or 29, that I actually started feeling connected to people, like legitimately connected to people, you know? But then, like, I was thinking about immaturity. Immaturity also has something to do with it. Like, I don't want to deal with this. I'm done. I just don't want to deal with this anymore. And it's a lack of perspective. So if we go back to the needs, what does that relate to? And it relates to purpose. You know, more specifically, accountability. Like if we realize that we have a need for accountability, you have a need for accountability. Man, the idea that sucks. It makes me want to retch, because I hate accountability. It sucks so much, because you know, it makes you realize that you have to challenge yourself. You have to push yourself. You have to do uncomfortable things. We have a need for that.
Yeah.
You know, and what that leads to is a purpose, right? You're not accountable to things just because. You're accountable to things because you're trying to accomplish something.
Yeah.
And that's a need for our life too. There's this forward motion that our life is purposed for, and only our life can accomplish that. But it's really easy to get swept up in the forward motion, the current of life being taken in a direction we don't want to go, because, once again, we're not accountable to ourselves, because we are immature, saying, you know what, I just don't want to deal with it. You know, and that sounds like a pretty crappy way to relate to somebody that is suicidal, but man, like, there are a lot of people that are suicidal because they expect the world to bow to them. And it's not going to, you know?
But I think also on the side, because there's a side of it that's not necessarily because they don't want to take care of their responsibilities or whatever, but there's a side where they don't know how to delegate things.
And that makes a lot of sense.
Too. So if everything rides on their shoulders and they can't do it, and then it goes back to everything is my fault.
Yeah.
When in reality, maybe you just need to let go of some of the burden that you are carrying too much. And not everything rests on your shoulders.
Well, that's that shame thing we were talking about. Like, yeah, you might be responsible. So what? You said something bad in a relationship, or so what? You dropped the ball and you hurt somebody. The opposite side of that is, as you just said, they might not have the skills, or may have never been taught the skills to rise to the occasion. But the hope has to be there, where it's like, well, okay, well, if I can learn 2 + 2, and if I can learn a squared plus b squared equals c squared, and if I can learn all these other things that are advanced concepts, because that's what you do as you mature, I can learn the same thing in relationships too. I can learn the same things in my professional endeavors.
I think, though, that if I were to guess, I would say that the majority of people who are seriously considering suicide are those who just don't know another way, not those who are just trying to avoid things because they don't want to deal with or be accountable with things. Because I think if they'd known, if someone was, this is, now I want to just put it out here, I'm not a professional. I do have a degree in Christian counseling, but I don't have one like psychology, so I can tell you like statistics or anything of that nature, scientifically speaking. But just from what I've observed specifically, I would say that probably the people who are more considering truly and maybe even have a plan of suicidal things just don't have the tools or know how to access the tools. Maybe they have them, but they don't know how to access them or utilize them. So they only see their lack. They only see their faults. They only see the pain. And they don't know how to look anywhere else because that is what their life has trained them to. It's like, what do you say, Tim, to a person who is raised in a sex trafficking, group that like they from very early on were taken in and prostituted out, and that's all they've known? What do you say to a person who grew up with manipulative, toxic parents that constantly smothered them, and it was kind of like a situation with Cinderella where they never was shown their purpose or value except for a small sliver of time, or not at all? Like, you can't just necessarily say to them like, well, just pick yourself up or whatever. First, you have to show them what their value is and to show them another way, and so that way they know that there are more options than just death ahead of them, because otherwise they probably just see death as the only option, either because they feel like everything is their fault, or they have to take care of everything, or that that they just have no value, or it just there's going to be continuous constant pain, or they have no purpose. Like, if that is not initially instilled into them, then it is our job to show the alternatives, so that way they know, and if you're watching, that you know that there are more than one directions you can head in, and that there is always hope, even in the situations where there feels like there is absolutely none whatsoever.
Yeah, I'm just thinking about John 3:16, where it says, "For God so loved the world, he gave his son." And that's just been on my mind a lot lately, because it starts with love and then it follows up with action. And David Olinger last night was talking about this book. I forget what the name of it is. It's like A Man's Pursuit for Change or something like that. It talks about a Holocaust survivor and how it was a doctor that survived the Holocaust, just relating his experiences. And he was talking about during the Holocaust, about the first thing they did was strip people of their identity and reduce them to a number. You no longer have a social security. You no longer have a profession. You no longer have a name or a title. You are a number, 24,642, 24,643. And that's all you are. All right, number 10,012, you need to go over here and do this thing or else you die. That whole concept, right? And he was talking about the basic synopsis of the book is essentially he found his purpose in helping other Holocaust victims that he's surrounding himself with to not give up hope. And that's reinstilling identity, talking about like, all right, what's your name? What are your aspirations? Like, who are you again? I watched a movie a long time ago. I think it was called Priceless. And it talks about sex trafficking. And that sucks, dude. Like, the idea, and like just the idea that even in Winston-Salem, there are girls that are just snatched up and they're just gone.
Yeah.
and they don't know what's happening. They're just thrust in this world where they don't have a name anymore. They just have somebody else's purpose, and once they fulfill that purpose, that's all it is. They don't have their own. That's really scary, man.
Yeah.
And I can understand. Like I can't fully empathize with that, because I've never experienced it.
Right.
But I've to a much lesser degree. I've been in public school. I know what it's like to feel unseen, to feel unimportant, to feel unincluded. And that's a really terrible place. But you asked, what do you tell those people? How do you engage with them? John 3:16, for God so loved the world, he gave his son. So I think the other side of the narrative I was talking about earlier, where it's like, pull yourself up by the bootstraps and just do something about your life. Quit being lazy. Quit being immature. Like, there is space for that once people know that they have value, but it starts with showing somebody that they have value. It's like...
Well, first you have to give them the bootstraps to pick themselves up with.
Yeah, well, I mean, this is Pride Month, and that's what we started off with, and the reason I brought that up is because I know I have a lot of people I've associated with. I have a lot of friends that are LGBT, and they've just talked to me about how, well, specifically through religion, they've been told, I am not good enough. I am not valuable because I am trying to figure this out. I have this tendency or whatever. And then you have people say, oh, that it's a choice. You're making this decision. Well, I mean, in some regards, yeah. Like, you can choose to put your penis in somebody. Like, that's a choice that you make, right?
Yeah.
Or to cut off your penis, whatever. That is a choice, but you still deal with the dysphoria in some way. And to tell somebody you're not valuable because of this, right? It's the separation of value and circumstance. Right, you can't see somebody as a circumstance. You have to see their value first and go from there. That's what Jesus was talking about when he said that if you have faith of a mustard seed, right? It all starts with the seed. It all starts with the value, the potential, the hope.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I just want to go to your question before you begin to explain
sure.
the answers to your own question. But honestly, I think you need to start with value first, like you were mentioning at the very end there. Mm-hmm. Going into their value first, because if there needs to be a shift to deal with certain things that are detracting from said value, that's only going to be known and accessed by starting through the gates of you are valuable, period. And there is no attachment to that, some kind of stipulation that once you achieve this, then you're valuable. No. It is just immediately you have your existence brings with it indescribable value. And so that's where you got to start. So I want to start there for those who are watching now and are going to watch in the future. I don't know what you've been through. I'm not going to claim that I know what you've been through, and I'm not going to diminish what you've been through, whether it is you think that it's very difficult and challenging or nothing at all, or however you currently perceive your situation. If it has brought you to a place where you can only see the best valuable outcome is you leaving this earth, you are valuable. And I don't mean that in a cliche way. I don't care what you are capable of doing physically or mentally. Your value is not linked to your capabilities. Mm-hmm. And if someone in the past tried to attach your value to what you are capable of thinking or saying or doing, I just want to take a second and say your value is not linked to your capabilities mentally or physically. Mm-hmm. It is much deeper than that, and it exists whether you're paraplegic or you have full ability to run, dance, and do acrobatics. It doesn't really matter, and that is because whatever life you live, whether you are seen by many, many people or only one person ever knows your name, so long as that you are known by one person, and you can't escape that, because regardless if you are immediately born and then taken away somewhere else, you are a byproduct of someone. So there is always one person who is affected by you, and that is your biological parent. That alone brings value. I've known people there are people, I'll give you for instance, there's a woman that I know who has cerebral palsy, and she's a beautiful woman. And I mean that physically to a degree, but also especially who she is especially beautiful. And I've worked with her, actually. We did celebrity prayer movement a while back ago. Her name is Angel. And I don't know exactly the depths of what she can do, but I do know that her cerebral palsy has her bound to a wheelchair. But God has used her, even though she's not able to go around visiting people all the time, whatever, and she has to be reliant, God has used her to affect me. And in moments where I felt hopeless, God has definitely used her life as an example to me to bring me courage. That, because like I'm a overworker, like I overthink,
it's true. It's very true.
That is, yes, I overthink things, and I push myself very hard and not realize how far I'm pushing myself, and I think I'm not really doing much. Mm-hmm. And knowing how God takes care of her has encouraged me greatly, because if God can take care of her and she can't work a normal job, how much more can God take care of me where I can? And I'm building something that doesn't make sense on the outside, but yet I know God's called me to it. And God has used her to encourage me. So your very life, the reason why you are valuable regardless of your mental capacity or your physical capacity, is because your very life is a testament to others that exist, other human beings. And I want you to know that. So your value is not, again, and I can't say this enough, it's not attached to what you can do or what you can think. It is beyond that.
Yeah, well, if I can jump in real quick, there was a guy named Lawrence that was speaking last night, and I don't know if he understands the weight of what he said and like how it hit me, but I don't know, it made a lot of sense to me. And basically he was talking about the crucifixion and about Jesus dying on a cross, and he said the cost of the crucifixion was Jesus's life, and the price, what was it, like basically the whole point Jesus went to the cross was
cost of our sin was the cross.
Yeah, the cost of our sins, like all the crappy stuff that we do, intentionally, unintentionally, whatever. But he said at the same time, Jesus died because we were worth it. And I'd always thought about those two as separate pieces. I never thought about them as the same piece. But while Jesus was hanging on that cross and he'd been like sheared, man, like his skin had been flayed off, and you know his hands were like pierced by nails, dude, and he's like suffocating, getting splinters down his back, and you know that was because I do crappy things all the time. He died to cover that, but he also died because I was worth paying that price, you know, and that's inherent to all of us. You know, he did that 2021 years ago because he knew that you were worth that. You were worth that price. And the sad narrative is that, like, as Christians these days, our task is to show people that they're valuable the same way. We're supposed to be Christ to people. And it's really tough because in our society, we're taught you first, not other people first, right? And that whole mentality is how a lot of people begin to believe that they're not valuable. It's me first, ergo, you must come second. So I'm going to puff myself up. And in this situation, I'm going to make fun of you because, I don't know, you live in a trailer. In middle school. You know what? Tim, put the phone down. I want to tell, we were on a three-way call. Tim, put the phone down. Me and this friend. And they said, hey, let's make fun of Tim because he lives in a trailer. Pick up the phone. And like, I never put it down. I knew they said that. And I was like, well, why are you doing this, man? Like, why are you making me feel horrible about myself? You know, I mean, that's just a case in point. There's something where they wanted to puff themselves up and puff me down. I guess that
Pull you down.
Pull me down.
There you go.
But like we're going through these things where you were talking about you can't hurt me if I hurt myself. That's a defense mechanism.
Mm-hmm.
You know, lack of control. It's my fault. It's thinking, oh, okay, everything is my fault and I can't do anything about it because people have made me feel horrible about having the sin which is already paid for. Right? It's already been taken care of. They're not giving me grace. Grace. Guys, you can't have value if you don't have grace.
What does that mean? You're going to have to expand on that.
So when you're looking around, and I'm always tasked with this because, you know, guys, if you deal with insecurity in any way, you're always looking for a way to make yourself feel better than the other person, to make yourself feel secure, right? And when you do that, when there's any pride associated with this up here, thinking, I need something, especially at the cost of another person, I need that to feel okay. You're not going to have grace for them. You're not going to acknowledge that they too are valuable. They too are going through something difficult. They too have things they struggle with, right? And when you can't have grace for somebody, you immediately dehumanize them. You immediately reduce them no longer as having value. You reduce them as being the target of your vitriol and anger. Or you view them as the source of why you feel the way that you feel. Right?
So I feel like a better way of saying it is it's not possible to see the value that everyone inherently has without grace.
Yeah.
I think that's a better way of putting it. Because the way you said it sounded like if you don't have grace, you don't have value, which I know that's not what you were trying to say. Everyone has value.
Mm-hmm. Well, everyone has grace too. Right.
But they have the option to either... in order to see the value that everyone has, you have to
lean into the grace.
Exactly.
Yeah. And that's why I said it was like one and the same.
Yeah.
But it's so hard. Like, guys... It's so easy to take the expectations of the world and just receive them as the gospel, especially pastors, especially parents, especially people that we want to be in relationship with or jobs that we want to have. And we can think, okay, I need to aspire to this. And because I don't hit that expectation, I'm a piece of crap. I should just give up. Right? Because, man, like a lot of people, at least the people I've talked to, they think that they're not good enough because they have a certain thing that they're dealing with, or they think that they don't cut the mustard because person A, B, or C told them, hey, you're not worth keeping in my life. You know?
Yeah.
And then it's just like, you can't control somebody else's perspective of you. You can't control other people. And when we think that that's where we get our fulfillment... actually, this goes back to what I was talking to you about before the stream. That's where we get our satisfaction. That's where we get our fulfillment. That's where we get our consummation. You can't base your life on that stuff because so frequently in life, you're not going to feel fulfilled. You're not going to feel satisfied. You're not going to feel consummated. And that's why hope is so necessary. So yeah. I guess I want to segue into that for the last half of our talk, Brandon. Like, hope. If somebody is leaning into suicide or the concept of suicide, actually, let me define hope first. Hope is the certainty that things are going to get better. Hope is the certainty that your situation, your perspective, tomorrow is going to be better than today, or at least has the potential to be, right? And so when you don't have hope, what do you have? Hopelessness. And it just makes sense. Like, if you're hopeless and if your worldview is tomorrow's not going to be better than today, it's like, it's all downhill, right? So how do you impress that on somebody? How do you model that? Like, how do you help somebody that's suicidal with the concept of hope?
Well, the thing, I've been thinking about this the whole time since you started asking that question, is hope is not something that is separate from reality. I think hope involves reality, because if you are hoping for the wrong things, that's more like unrealistic optimism. It's like I'm hoping for things that are not. They could happen, and there's nothing wrong with having hope for things that are probably, without short of a miracle, are not going to happen. Like, I think there's a point to that. But I feel like to have proper hope, you must also be aware of your current situation, and find ways, and to know and to find the resilience to change the situation one bit at a time until it finally reflects what you're hoping for. And so I feel like in order to impress hope upon a person, you have to address the reality that they're in, to validate the reality that they're in, too. Meaning, even if there's a situation where they're not in that bad of a state, but they feel like they are, I think it's important to validate what they're feeling. Which is something that I know you and I have maybe had a little more of a struggle with because I am more emotional. But just having that validation helps me feel human, and feeling human gives me hope to deal with my feelings. And then I can deal with them a whole lot better. And I think that's really important when it comes to addressing, since this is Pride Month, when it comes to addressing people who are dealing with, or working through, or have, however you want to put it, they're homosexual, they're transgender, they're whatever label you want to put on it. What they feel about their situation needs to be looked at and validated. That is a real thing that they feel, and you're not a terrible person for feeling those things.
Mm-hmm.
You're not alien. You're not less than. You're not weird. You don't have to say queer. You're not queer. Because I think queer is questioning, but it's also a negative term. You are just a normal human being.
You know, that concept is like really strange to me. It's like, I'm going to wear this label just because I question things. It's like we all question things.
Right.
Like sometimes I question, like, do I really have eyes for my wife because I looked at this other girl at the gym? It's like, and I turn to look again. You know, it's like, no, man, that's a temptation that I fight because I've chosen a covenant to my wife.
Yeah.
You know, or like, I'm trying to eat healthier. It's like, okay, well, am I a bad person? Like, am I a horrible person? Am I just like immature because I chose to eat ramen last night, even though I've been working out and I've promised, you know, Ariane, I promised to eat better. And, you know, I acknowledge that, you know, me eating poorly is going to make me live less as long. And I don't want you to go through life without me. That whole concept, you know, it's like, guys, you got to remember that the playing field is absolutely even. And Christians, if you're watching this and you think that you're above anybody else, you're missing the gospel, man. If you're part of the LGBT community, if you're part of, if you have issues with drinking, if you're a pedophile, whatever your situation is, if you think that one party or one person is above you just because they're theological or like whatever struggles they do and don't have, man, we are all on the same level. And that might be a tough pill to swallow for some people because, especially in our culture, especially things like pedophilia, like it's not okay. It's not okay. And there's some people that are vying to say it's okay. But at the same time, aside from the circumstances of them making choices or having tendencies and leaning into those, before that, for God so loved the world, action.
Yeah.
For God sees your value first, then something. Because it's all about a connection with the Holy Spirit. It's all allowing God to love us.
But again, when it comes to helping someone with hope, we must first start with looking at the situation that they're in and validating what they're feeling, that it is real, and that it can and needs to be addressed. Because otherwise, if we can't even address that much, then how are we going to address other things? Mm-hmm. We have to address the reality of the situation, you know. And so once that's addressed, then we can begin to focus on where we want to head from there, and look into the hope of the situation. And now for those on the more religious side who come into this, when I say validate how people feel, I'm not suggesting that that's where you stop. because you do want to continue moving forward from that place.
So real quick on that, guys, that is an excellent point, Brandon. And the reason I call that out is because Chase Hicks said something really remarkable. And he said that it's really easy to be a lazy Christian because you can think, okay, well, we have the story of the Bible, and we look at it as an encyclopedia to reference. Okay, this is wrong, this is right. Okay, so here's the answer here instead of the overall gospel of who Jesus was, right? And it's really easy to look at people's situations and say, you're sinful. And move on with your life, right? The whole purpose of community, the whole purpose of church, right? We were talking about this before. Like, the whole purpose of church is not missions. And this is a new concept for me, so I'm still thinking this out. The whole purpose of church is not missions. The whole purpose of missions is church. And what I mean by that is walking through life with people is how you build community, right? That's what the disciples did. Like, right? They were just called together and they were figuring stuff out. You know, one of them was a tax collector. One of them was, several of them were fishermen. They came from all different walks of life. They didn't figure that out first and say, okay, well, let's go tell people about Jesus. No, they found Jesus in the process of doing that. They built community in the process. But it's really easy, especially from our religious high horses, to think, okay, well, they're down here, we're up here. Let's tell them they need to fix that so they can associate with us, when that's backwards. We have to be able to walk with people through things and go the full mile, not just, okay, well, let me invalidate or validate your feelings. There's a bigger commitment there.
Yeah. You are not going to be changed if someone just immediately points out all these things that are wrong with you. Even if you're a person who is very compliant, like myself, and wants to try to fit into rules, I'm not going to accept the first thing that someone says to me, especially if it doesn't even line up with anything that I know about myself up to that point. And especially also if it's negative. But I'm more apt to listen if someone were to first understand what I'm going through and then begin to present other ways of thinking about it. Because then they have validated the value that I have as a person and my perceptions, and now they're inviting me into new ways of thinking that I have the option to choose to believe or not to believe. And so in the sense of bringing hope to a hopeless person, a person who has no hope, that is, address the reality of the situation. Then we go into what could be, and what should be, and things of that nature, because there is always hope. There is always things you can do. I'm in the process of learning about things people did in the heat of persecution. There's always things, even if everything you had was stripped away from you and your dignity was removed, there are still things you can do, even in that microcosm of free will. Like just small things here and there. Always places that can be changed and adjusted. And there is hope for the captives. There is hope of being set free. For those who are addicted, there's hope for freedom. For those who feel like they have no value, there's hope that you do have value and that already exists. That is able to be found, and it's also not something to get someone to help. I think that also involves getting them involved in community too, because just one person alone is not going to do it. Especially if you've been surrounded by constant questioning of your value and constant putting it on what you're doing. If you had multiple people sharing with you your value over the span of time, it would be a lot better than just one person, because that one human being is imperfect and will get tired, and will have other things they'll need to do. So I think part of instilling hope is to not be alone, to be surrounded by multiple people, which can be very painful, I think, if you're dealing with depression and suicidal thinking, but the very right thing you need despite that feeling of pain.
Yeah. And I think something to keep in mind, guys, whether you're considering suicide, you're engaging with somebody who's considering suicide, or if in the future you want to prepare yourself, is just realizing what is essential and what's not. Because if you think about how Jesus walked, and the things he talked about, and even if you don't believe in Jesus, these concepts still apply. He was talking about who people are. Like, you are my beloved. He always focused on who they were before what they did. Because, guys, if you go through life and the people that you're surrounding yourself with are focused more on what you do, and there's persecution in the LGBT community as well. It's like, there's somebody who's coming up on our live stream on the 18th who we're going to be talking about truth and compassion, related to homosexuality, right? And they were saying that when they decided to say no to their homosexual tendencies, right, there were parts of the LGBT community that says, don't commit these actions or else you no longer have value to us. You can't be one of us. And like, what does that even mean? We're all part of the same race. We're all sons and daughters of God. We are all breathed, like he breathed life into all of us. But on the flip side, it's like, okay, well, let's say that you're a part of a church and you go to somebody who's LGBT and say, you need to change these tendencies or else you're not going to be saved, right? You can make the head change, but if you know that your value is not being instilled, your value is not being acknowledged, your value is not being cultivated before that, man, it's just that's like fixing up your house when the foundation is rotting. That's long term going to just crumble. And that's why it's so toxic to look at circumstances first, right? Even if it takes somebody their entire rest of their life to change their circumstances, showing them what their value is, introducing them to the concept that you're not a number, you're a name, introducing them to the fact that while I'm not always going to validate your feelings in an unhealthy way, I'm going to show you that your feelings are valid, if that makes sense. It's like the way you feel matters. What you're going through matters. What you're struggling with matters. There is grace over your situation, and you only get grace by acknowledging you have value before circumstance. That's what grace is. Really, guys, especially if you're Christians, you have to let the Holy Spirit be the Holy Spirit.
Yeah.
You cannot bring conviction. You cannot tell people that their circumstances need to change because they're not going to change their circumstances if they don't know who they are.
Yeah. And I think as like a final thought too, just an encouragement, I always like to tie value back into God for those who are and are not Christians, because God has been a huge force in it when it comes to me not entertaining for very long periods of time suicide, because every time that I get into those dark places, God always shows me my value in the process, and he's able to be there when no one else is able to be there. And COVID has definitely brought plenty of opportunities to need God because no one else is able to be there because COVID. And it is a lot of my sanity that I still have, despite the fact that I'm in a transitional period, despite the fact that I'm not always sure exactly how things are going to end, despite the fact that I'm not even sure sometimes if I'm even effective in what I'm doing or if it makes a difference. The thing that keeps me sane through all that has been God. And I'm not talking about religion. I'm not talking about the religious aspects, but the relational aspects of like God. Like spending time with him, intentionally getting quiet, getting alone to be with him, and then figuring out and asking him, what do I mean to him? Or he just tells me outright because I'm just sitting there waiting and talking. Because I think a lot of times when people try to encounter God, they try to religiously encounter God with constant prayers and they never stop talking. And they immediately end that and they go on to the next thing. And they don't have a chance for God to speak to them. But you have to look, if you want to get to know God, the easiest way to look at him is to think about how you would have conversations with a friend. You're not going to obviously do all of the talking in a relationship with a friend. You're going to pause and let them speak, and you're going to listen to what they have to say. And if you want the relationship to last, you're going to really consider what they have to say and not just essentially listen so you can respond. But you're going to sit there and listen. You're going to make time for them. You're going to travel out to meet them, or they're going to travel out to meet you. There's a give and take that's involved. And the exact same basis exists with God also. Give him time. Allow him to speak. Get alone with him. You're not going to just constantly being in social situations, although he can talk to you in those situations. It's a lot easier to have a one-on-one conversation when you're one-on-one with God. So I want to encourage you to take a risk. I believe there's a God out there. I believe that he is the creator of all things. I believe that something can't come from nothing. And so the very fact that you are sitting where you're at, listening to us talk about what we're talking about on a YouTube platform over the internet, none of this would be made possible if nothing existed. I don't think something comes from nothing. I believe that there is an ultimate being that exists, and that he is benevolent, and that he cares deeply about everything he creates, down to the very minuscule details that we will never be able to get to the end of because they keep dropping out just like him. And I believe that this being is personal and is more than capable of communicating with us, being as infinite as he is, to be able to create this existence where you're sitting or standing or walking or however you're going, or driving, however you're coming across this YouTube video or Facebook video. All that kind of comes together because there's a being that exists that created it. And that I believe that he's benevolent. Otherwise, if he wasn't, I don't think anything would exist because of how, to crap a lot of things have gone. And I would have probably given up a long time ago. But I'm not God. And I'm learning to be more like him.
Yeah.
To be more patient.
And I guess wrapping up on my end, because we have a couple more minutes. We titled the stream "The Deception of Suicide," and the reason that's so pertinent to the idea of suicide is because a belief that people have going into suicide by and large is that because circumstances are XYZ, it's easier just to end it. And guys, your whole purpose for being alive is not circumstances. Whatever you think would be easier taking out of the world, man, it's not based on circumstance. It never has been. It never will be, And so you are not the sum of circumstances either. Your perspective is. And so when you're thinking about the cost of entry when it comes to suicide, it's like you're not getting rid of suicide or circumstances. You're getting rid of your value. You're choosing to give something up that's been paid for. Right? There's so many people there's a whole lineage of people before you that have strived to give you what you have. And once again, that's not a circumstance. That's just understanding that a price has been paid for you just to get here. I mean, think about your parents, even if they weren't great parents, even if you were adopted, man, somebody bore you. Somebody went through labor pains, 9 months because, life is valuable. Life happens. We're designed for life. We're designed for community. Community is how two people coming together happens, And then by some form or fashion, you got to where you are. You are at the age you are right now just because. My dad was an orphan. His parents died when he was 6, and he just ran around Thailand as a 6-year-old orphan, homeless, trying to figure stuff out. It would have been really easy for him to give up. He came over here to the United States, had a really difficult life. And then through bringing me and my brother up, and his daughter as well, my half-sister, there were a lot of times where if I was him, I would have wanted to have given up. But he saw so much value in me that he didn't give up. Now, I know that a lot of you don't have that same story where your parents did give up. But what I'm saying is, by some happenstance, you're here today still. And there's a lot of sacrifice that's been made for you. And there has been an ultimate sacrifice through Jesus where you have value. Like we were talking about earlier, the crucifixion was all about the price that's been paid for you. John 3:16, for God so loves you, he gave his son. He became a man who died a horrible death because you have worth, apart from what you think that you've fallen short from. Your job, your relationships, your finances, your clothing, the way you look, whatever, man. Like there's always going to be that stuff, and there's always going to be worries about falling short with people or coming out of relationship with them or not being good enough or people not choosing you, because everybody struggles with the same things that you're struggling with. And that's the whole validation, man. It's like there is always some form of empathy that we can feel with somebody, right? I'm not a homosexual, but I can look at a guy and say, oh, I can see why a homosexual guy would find this dude attractive, right? There's always some form of empathy. But when you say this person's value is based on this circumstance that I deem is not good, that's when the value goes down the drain. That's where grace goes down the drain. So guys, like I'm speaking to you right now. If you are suicidal, I want to challenge you, strip away all the circumstances that are causing you to think that, and what are you left with, right? And if there's nothing there and you don't have a concept of value, feel free to reach out to us, thoughtraid@gmail.com, or if you look in the link below, there's a Discord channel. We'd love to talk to you. And if you've been hurt by people who have told you that God looks at your circumstances first, I want to say they need grace too. Because they obviously don't have a perspective of value and love the way that it needs to be.
That's what their core belief is, and that means that they see that about themselves as well.
Yeah, and that's shaky sand, man. When you build your foundation, when you build your house on things that you can uphold yourself, it is going to fall. And that's why your relationship with God is important first and foremost, but secondly, community is important. So if you're looking for community, you want to get connected in a way where people will see your value first, reach out to us. We're not going to do it perfect either.
Yeah.
But we know what you've been through.
Best of our ability.
Yeah, we know what you're going through, at least to some degree, and if we don't, we know somebody who does.
Yeah.
So there is always hope.
Yeah.
Because in 1 Corinthians 13, well, let me go to John 3:16 once again. For God so loved the world first. 1 Corinthians 13 says faith, hope, and love, right? Faith and hope, those two things are elusive. Faith is believing in what's unseen, and hope is the certainty that things are going to get better. That's all part of what God is doing for us. And so we have to hang on to that. And you can say, hey, God, I don't even know if you're there. Dude, I don't even know if you're real. And I'm having a hard time, but whatever, like if it's possible, before I decide to pull the trigger, and that wasn't a pun, before you decide to kill yourself, if you're thinking about it, give it a chance. Just say, hey, God, if you're there, I want to lean into it, and can I borrow some of your hope just for a little bit until I can find some way, or you put somebody in my life, or a door is open for you to show me that I'm valuable.
Yeah.
Because he will always come through.
And in situations where maybe you're not ready to do that right now, but maybe you are ready to make some sort of a change, I would say go out and be known by other people. Like, allow yourself to be known by other people. Go and find others to talk about what you're going through, so that you are not alone in what you're going, because you're never alone. Never alone. Regardless of what you feel in the moment, you're never alone. There's always someone who is going to be willing to listen, and it may take some time to find that person. But if you keep going, you will find such a person who is willing to help and listen and be there for you. So go and be known. Be known, either finding a counselor or friends, reaching out to friends. If you have trustworthy family members, or of a good church. Either way, there are multiple ways. Doing this not by yourself is the best thing you can do. Because as you reach out to people and they begin to work with you and whatever you're going through, now you're affecting other people's lives, which helps increase in hope because you're no longer isolated. Because I know sometimes people will isolate and they feel like, it's not going to matter, I don't affect anyone. Well, you're already going to affect someone. But it's good to go out there and be around other people, even as scary as that can be, even with the possible rejection you may encounter. because as you begin to bring people into your life and be known as this is what I'm going through, that will allow you to heal, and that healing will in turn help you to help other people, which increases and destroys the narrative that you are alone and make no difference. Because really, it just takes stepping out, if you can. And I know there also might be some situations where you might not be able to do that, which I understand. But if you can, do it. I would highly suggest to do it. Failure is not a bad thing. It's a part of growth and success, is making mistakes and failure. And so if you've ever believed that if you fail, that's it, you're a terrible person, there is no hope for you or anything of that nature, no, failure is a part of success. You won't know how to succeed if you don't know where not to fail. And so I just want to encourage you not to be afraid or paralyzed by the fear of failure. And that means failure in finding the right person, failure in saying the right things, failure in reaching out in a specific length of time before someone goes somewhere or whatever. Just try. Try again. Because eventually there will be a breakthrough. Some shape, way, or form. There'll be a breakthrough. So I don't know. I just wanted to put that out there before we close. But with all that said, I think this is a good stopping point.
Yeah. Okay. So we want to thank you guys for watching. Still in Brandon's Thunder.
I wanted to finish this one.
We broadcast Monday, Friday, and Saturday at 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. We got some cool stuff coming up. We're talking with Philosophy again next Friday, June 18th, 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time.
But specifically, tomorrow, I want to remind you guys that we have David Ibrahim.
Oh, that's right. The anime, video games, and Jesus.
How does this all fit together? So if you have interest in anime or video games or Jesus, and you want to know how all these things fit together, join us tomorrow at 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, because David is going to be joining us, and you do not want to miss that. But I want to thank you guys for watching, and we'll be seeing you again soon. We love you guys, and again, if you're going through any of this stuff, just reach out to us, thoughtraid@gmail.com, or let us know in the comments. We are waiting for you.
I can see far away from where I've been. He says I see a potential. I see a potential in my eyes. I see a potential. I never lost sight of the reason why you're alive. You're alive. You're alive. We sing Jesus, you're alive.